Therefore thus saith the Lord, Behold, I shall bring evil upon them. And though they will cry unto me, I will not hearken unto them. Jeremiah 11:11. Us stars Letitia Nyong'o, Winston Duke, Elizabeth Moss, and is directed by Jordan Peele. What's up, guys? It's finally to review the movie Us, directed by Jordan Peele, one that has been high on my radar ever since I saw that first trailer quite a few months ago. The premise of this movie is so irresistible. And we are going to do a spoiler review here. I posted on Twitter if you would like me to do a spoiler or a non-spoiler review. Or I think as I worded it, break that shit open, or break that bitch open. So that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna break this bitch open. I'm glad we're doing that because it's hard to review this movie without talking spoilers, because really it's the spoiler stuff that makes it so great, in my opinion. Anytime there's a polarizing movie on the horizon, I know that it's gonna be some fun stuff to discuss, whether I like it or not, because that's what's fun about polarizing movies. And if you really think about it, the best directors out there, they do polarizing movies from time to time. You take a director like Denis Villeneuve, who directed Enemy and Arrival. These are movies that are polarizing. They had their non-fans, and then they had fans like myself who thought these movies were brilliant. So I knew going into Us that this is a movie that could go either way for me, and I saw a lot of complaints about the last act, so much so that I thought I'm probably not going to like this movie, just because I've heard so many complaints about that last act, about how almost too ambiguous it is. It leaves so much unsaid, and some people just like everything explained to them in movies. Here's my thing on that. I just need a good backbone to the story. I don't think you can get away with everything, but if you give me a good enough backbone to the story, then I can suspend disbelief a little bit, especially when you got premises like this that are just completely fiction. Like, this is not something that could happen in real life. Thankfully for this movie, I didn't really find it even ambiguous. I thought everything was pretty well explained all the way through. And I will say that, like, the point where this movie really goes into like spoiler territory and, you know, shows us stuff that we didn't see in that trailer, that's really where I started enjoying the movie. And I saw a lot of people say that they didn't enjoy the movie from this point on. So for me, this was a great movie, so I'm looking forward to digging into this one actually. And before I dive into this, know that I wasn't the biggest Get Out fan. When I first saw it, I did like it. Jordan Peele does a fine job directing that movie, but I did have some issues with that movie in the character department, in the pacing department. It's still good. It's a very well directed movie. It's an A-level movie, but the horror fan in me, for example, wasn't completely satisfied with it. This movie, on the other hand, is, I think, much better. And it really goes for broke, goes for the jugular. And if you've seen the movie, then that's kind of a pun. But quick plot synopsis, this movie starts off in 1986, and we see our main character Adelaide as a young child. And her father is supposed to be watching her, but he doesn't do a great job at it, and then she's walking away. And she goes on the beach into this like fun house, you know, and it says like find yourself. And so she goes in there, and once she gets up to this mirror, she sees this exact replica of her. It's not a mirror image, it's actually another person, but it looks just like her. And so from that point on, we go to the present day. And a lot of you guys, like I said, this is a spoiler review. I'm wondering how many of you guys actually thought, you know, from that moment on, that these two are gonna swap places. I didn't figure that out until somewhere in the middle of the movie. I started wondering, I was like, ooh, wouldn't it be really cool? And to give credit to my wife, she literally leaned over to me and she was like, I know the twist. And I was like, wait, are you thinking the same thing I'm thinking? And she literally told me, I think they swap places. And my wife does this all the time. She's very good at picking up twists. And, you know, this is pretty early on in the movie, and I was like, oh my God, if they do go through that, that's gonna be freaking genius, which is what they did. But anyway, going back to the present day, the family is at the beach. You have Gabe and Adelaide and their two children. They're at the beach. One of the children, the young boy, ends up going back to the fun house. It doesn't really show him go in the fun house. He's really in like a porta potty, but it's kind of implied that he goes into the fun house. But anyway, he really walks upon this like scarecrow type figure, and I think the scarecrow is kind of what summons the whole thing to happen. Or at least I think that scarecrow's there for us to think that there's some kind of spell, but not really. There's been this uprising that's been orchestrated down below for years and years, for like over 30 years. But later that night, they're at the house, getting ready for bed, and then all of a sudden, one of the children comes up and says there's a family outside waiting there. And this is that scene we see in the trailer, and it's a really creepy image, actually. Very effective, especially in terms of building tension. Jordan Peele does such a great job in this first section, playing with the lighting, playing with really patience and time. You're wondering, when are these, is this family gonna strike? And I remember that one scene where they're all standing there, and then all of a sudden you see, like, immediately it's go time. The kids like scurry about. The way he played with like physicality in these characters, I think, is brilliant. I don't know if they were actually using some CGI there or not, or if they actually had some actors that were just that fast, or maybe sped up the camera a little bit. But whatever they did, it worked perfectly. I think Jordan Peele, if we can jump over to the directing points a bit, really knows how to work every facet of filmmaking, how to play with your audience, and using every tool of the trade, whether it be CGI, whether it be in the camera, whether it be even practical effects. But man, the guy does such a great job of just playing with timing, really, because I think timing is so important when it comes to horror. You don't want to scare your audience too quick, and you don't want to make them wait too long. I think John Carpenter was a master of this, of really kind of stretching out a scene as long as you can, and being able to strike at the right time. You can compare horror to comedy in terms of timing. They're very similar, actually. Comedic timing is very important. Same thing with horror. And Jordan Peele does, I would say he's one of the best today. I'm not going to go ahead and say he's the next Carpenter, but you know what? A lot of people like to Get Out. This movie, I think, was phenomenal. If this guy keeps going like he's going, he already is kind of getting the term, the new M. Night Shyamalan, and you'll definitely see a lot of M. Night Shyamalan camera takes in this, especially like in the flashback scenes. And I don't always highlight directors in my reviews, but Jordan Peele has something to say, and I think you have to mention his work in this movie. It's brilliant. But then once the family does strike, you don't know if they're gonna kill them immediately or what they want. And then once they do strike, we have that moment where we'll just call her Red, the red version of Adelaide. She starts speaking in this really weird cadence. Her voice feels like it's strained, and it's really creepy. And this is such an important scene because it sets up what's going on, why they are there. One complaint I heard a lot about this movie was not enough was explained. I think they explained everything just the right amount, actually. There are a couple of scenes where Red Adelaide is explaining what's going on, why they are doing what they're doing, why there's a family that looks just like them. There's this whole society that lives in the subway system below, and they've been down there for, who knows how long. This takes place, 30-something years after the beginning of the movie. So the Wilson family, they're able to escape, and then they end up going over to the Tyler family with Elizabeth Moss and her husband and their children. And this is where the blood really starts kicking in. This is, we're firmly in spoiler territory right now because this is nothing that was in the trailers, actually. But up to this point, I was just wondering to myself, like, is this going to be one of those movies where we're going to have very little blood, and pretty much all the way through it's just going to be more of a tension-based type movie? Hell no. Once they get to this scene, especially that scene where the Tyler children are killed, pretty much the whole family's killed within like seconds of each other. From that moment, you're wondering, why did this family get killed so quickly, and why did the Wilson family survive? Or at least up to this point. And the reason they did survive is because, we remember at the very end of this movie, Adelaide and Red, they swap places. Which again, I think was freaking brilliant. So, because it raises all these questions like, so now Red Adelaide has lived with the Wilson family this whole time. That doesn't necessarily mean she's good or bad, your environment can sometimes determine how you're gonna be as a person. The real Adelaide has been downstairs in the subway system for, over 30 years. And what that has done to her has really made her a different person. She's a very vengeful person. She has orchestrated this complete uprising. That's where you get the big hands across America image that you see at the end. But I love how Jordan Peele, you know, he took like because I remember there was this big hands across America thing in the mid 80s. And, you know, he really like tried to tie every thread without giving too much, because you only want to give as much information as you need to. I think a good way to compare it is like look at a book and a movie version. If you had a book version of this movie, I'm sure that there'd be a lot more information in there. But I think in the movie, there's just enough to keep your audience invested and, you know, enough to explain the story. Now also, another reason why I think this movie is directed so well is because it has a perfect first, second, and third act structure. You know, first act being the invasion of the Wilson family, second act being moving away from the Wilson family to the Tyler family, and then the third act being, you know, the big finale when Adelaide ends up confronting Red, and, you know, the big showdown at the end. To me, it was paced so freaking well. And the performance by Lupita Nyong'o is flat out amazing in this movie. This is one of the best performances I've seen by a female actress in quite a while, actually, because she has to play two different characters, and they're very different characters. She really is the most important person in this movie. And I was completely there throughout her whole journey in this movie. I loved all the flashbacks too, after we find out the twist. And then we see, you know, that scene where the camera's just sitting there in that doorway and she's just sitting there quiet. You know, you start putting the breadcrumbs together and you realize that she is actually Red all these years later. Just the way that scene was handled, it made you realize that you have to think about these characters in a completely different way now. This whole time, we have been thinking that Adelaide is the, you know, above ground Adelaide when she's actually Red. But give this freaking woman an Oscar now. I want to marry this woman. She was amazing. Also, you can kind of compare this story to the Upside Down in Stranger Things. It's like there's an upside down, but there is, you know, a living entity on both sides. And it makes me wonder if maybe Jordan Peele grabbed a little bit of that idea. Not sure, but it's interesting. Also, tonally, I think this movie was great too because it had the right amount of comedy in there and the right amount of horror. I will say, my audience was really loving this movie to death, so much so that they were like yelling and screaming. And usually I don't like an audience that's way too loud, but there was nothing I could do about it. They were freaking out in this movie, and by the end of it, they were all elated, which again made me wonder, like, why are all these people hating this movie? The audience I saw this movie with, they were loving the hell out of it. You know, they're very vocal about what was going on. And call it polarizing, call it what you want, but you know what? Horror needs movies like this, like It Follows, like The Witch, like Us. You know, to take a premise like this with these characters called the Tethered, and, you know, this whole like sci-fi fantasy dimension, it works so well. And this was a perfect representation of that. Guys, I'm giving this movie a Trapped on an Island. It is the best movie of the year so far. And I would be shocked if it leaves my top 5 by the end of the year. Really good movie. I can't recommend Us enough, but I do think it's a movie that requires repeat viewings. I loved it on my first viewing. I can't wait to watch it again. I just thought it was amazing. And it's, you know, I think too, if it's a movie that I can't get out of my head, which it has not left my head since I watched it, you know, it's a movie that makes you think, you know, gets a conversation going. When I left the theater, my whole family, we were talking about this movie and, you know, what this could mean and what this could mean. But we all pretty much had the same idea of, you know, how it all unfolded. I thought the twist was pretty damn self-explanatory, if I'm being honest. So anyway, guys, that's my thoughts on Us. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on this movie. Did you like it? If you didn't like it, let me know what you didn't like, and get a good discussion going. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays we do Free For All Fridays. Stay tuned for my Spooky Empire video. I went to Spooky yesterday, had a blast, and I'm putting together that video right now, but I want to get this one out first. So anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.